David Avery's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter as he poured his second cup of coffee. The name on the screen made his stomach tighten. Miles. His brother hadn't called him in 3 years. Not since their explosive fight about Sophia on Christmas morning. "What do you want?" David answered, already knowing this couldn't be good news. "Jessica's missing." Miles's voice cracked like he'd been crying. "She never came home from school." David set down his mug, so hard coffee splashed onto the counter. "What do you mean missing?" "She walked out of Wyatt Elementary at 3:15. Same as always. Never made it home. The police, they're here now, asking questions." David closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. Wyatt, Oregon. The small town where they'd grown up, where secrets grew like weeds in the damp soil, where everyone knew everyone else's business, except when it mattered, where he'd sworn never to return after what happened with Sophia. "How long has she been gone?" David asked. 6 hours. Sophia's losing her mind. The whole town's looking for her. We've got search parties in the woods, volunteers checking every house. Have you checked her friends' houses? Maybe We've checked everywhere, David. Everywhere. Miles's breathing was ragged, desperate. Her teacher, her friends, the library, the park. No one's seen her since she left school. David was already moving toward his bedroom, grabbing clothes from the closet. What do the police think? They're treating it like a runaway case. But Jessica doesn't run away. She's never even stayed out past dinner without permission. "Miles, I know we haven't talked, but..." "David, I know you hate Sophia. I know you think I made a mistake marrying her. But Jessica is just a kid. She's only 10 years old. She needs help." The desperation in his brother's voice cut through years of anger and resentment. Whatever David thought about Miles's choices, Jessica was innocent in all of this. "I'm coming," David said, shoving clothes into a bag. "You don't have to. I'm already packing. I'll be there in 2 hours." "David, yeah, thank you." The drive from Portland to Wyatt took 2 hours through winding forest roads that cut through dense stands of Douglas fir and cedar. David's hands gripped the steering wheel as memories flooded back. Jessica's shy smile at Christmas 3 years ago, the way she'd quietly opened presents while Sophia criticized every gift. The way she'd hidden behind Miles when David and Sophia had fought about money, about priorities, about what kind of mother puts designer clothes before her child's needs. The last words he'd said to his brother echoed in his mind. "Don't call me until you get rid of her. That woman is poison, and she's going to destroy everything you care about." Miles had chosen Sophia over family. Now, while Miles was calling about Jessica, David pushed the accelerator down harder. The speedometer climbed past 70 as he navigated the mountain curves. Every minute Jessica was missing was another minute something terrible could be happening to her. His phone rang again. "Miles, any update?" David answered without taking his eyes off the road. "Nothing. The search teams have been through the woods twice. The K-9 units lost her scent at the edge of town." "What about security cameras?" "The school must have cameras. They show her leaving the building alone at 3:15. She was carrying her backpack and walking toward home. After that, nothing. Traffic cameras?" "Wyatt doesn't have traffic cameras, David. This isn't Portland, right? Wyatt was the kind of place where people still left their doors unlocked and thought bad things only happened in big cities. The kind of place where a predator could operate for years without anyone noticing." David pulled into the driveway of the modest 2-story house on Pine Street. 3 police cars sat outside. A news van from the local station had parked across the street. David counted at least 20 neighbors milling around the front yard. He pushed through the crowd. Sheriff Davidson stood on the porch, notebook in hand. The man had put on 50 pounds since high school, but still wore the same smug expression. "David Avery," Davidson said. "Heard you're coming back. Where's my brother?" "Inside with his wife. She's been through hell today." David pushed past him. The living room was chaos. Sophia sat on the couch, dabbing her eyes with tissues while a reporter adjusted her camera angle. Miles paced behind her, his face pale and drawn. "The whole community is rallying around us," Sophia was saying into the camera. "Jessica is such a sweet girl. Everyone loves her. We just want her home safe." David watched his sister-in-law perform. Sophia had always been beautiful in a calculated way. Blonde hair that never moved, makeup that never smudged, clothes that cost more than Miles made in a month. But something was off. Her tears looked real, but her eyes stayed cold. "That's enough," Miles said to the reporter. "We need some privacy." The camera crew packed up and left. Sophia noticed David standing in the doorway. "David." She stood and walked toward him. "Thank you for coming." He didn't move when she tried to hug him. "Tell me what happened." "She was supposed to walk home after school," Miles said. "Same route she takes every day. Mrs. Patterson saw her leave the building, but she never made it here." David scanned the room. Jessica's backpack wasn't by the door where kids usually drop them, but her pink winter jacket hung on its hook. "She took her backpack, but left her jacket?" David asked. "She must have forgotten it," Sophia said quickly. "She was probably excited about something." "In October? It's 40 degrees outside." Davidson stepped into the room. "We've talked to all her friends. Searched the route home. No signs of a struggle. Kids run away sometimes." "Jessica doesn't run away," Miles snapped. "How would you know?" David asked. "When's the last time you actually talked to her?" Miles flinched. "She's my daughter." "Is she?" David looked at Sophia. "Or is she just another accessory for your perfect life?" "That's enough." Sophia's voice turned sharp. "We're all worried about Jessica. Fighting won't bring her back." David noticed something else. No forced entry on the doors. Windows intact. If someone had taken Jessica, they hadn't broken into the house to wait for her. "I want to see her room," David said. "The police already searched it," Sophia said. "I wasn't asking you." David climbed the stairs to the second floor, his footsteps heavy on the carpet. Jessica's room was at the end of the hall, past the master bedroom and the guest room that used to be his when he'd visit as a teenager. The door was closed. David turned the handle and stepped inside. Jessica's room was neat and pink, filled with books and stuffed animals arranged with military precision. But it felt empty somehow, like a display in a furniture store rather than a place where a 10-year-old actually lived and played. The bed was made perfectly, hospital corners on the sheets. Every book was organized by size on a shelf. Even her stuffed animals were lined up in order of height. That IT didn't look like a child's room. It looked like Sophia's idea of what a child's room should look like. David opened Jessica's dresser drawers one by one. Everything was organized with the same impossible neatness. Shirts folded and stacked by color, socks rolled and arranged in rows, sweaters layered like they were in a department store. Too organized for any 10-year-old David had ever known. This was Sophia's work, not Jessica's. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of carefully folded sweaters that looked expensive but hardly worn, David found a spiral notebook. The cover was decorated with unicorns and rainbows, but the edges were worn from handling. That he opened it and found pages filled with Jessica's handwriting. Math homework with careful calculations. Book reports about stories he recognized from his own childhood. Lists of vocabulary words with definitions. And on the very last page, written in pencil and partially erased but still visible, a single line that made his blood run cold. "Mom has a secret and I'm scared." David carefully tore out the page and slipped it into his jacket pocket. This wasn't the notebook of a happy child. It was the record of a little girl trying to make sense of something frightening happening in her home. He searched the rest of the room more carefully. Under the mattress, he found nothing. Behind the bookshelf, nothing. But in the back of the closet, behind a row of dresses that looked too formal for everyday wear, David found a small shoebox. Inside were photos. Pictures of Jessica with Miles at the zoo, at the beach, at baseball games. All of them were from before Sophia entered their lives. There were no photos of Jessica with Sophia, no family portraits, no happy memories of their life together. IT was like Jessica, was keeping a secret collection of the time when she felt loved. David heard footsteps on the stairs. Sophia's voice carried up from the hallway. "I don't know why he needs to go through her things. The police already did a thorough search." Miles responded, but David couldn't make out the words. He quickly replaced the shoebox and closed the closet door. When Sophia appeared in the doorway, David was standing by the window, looking out at the backyard. "Find anything interesting?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp, just trying to understand what might have been going through her head. "She's a normal 10-year-old girl, David. She thinks about school and friends and toys, not whatever conspiracy theories you're cooking up. Conspiracy theories? You've always looked for reasons to blame me for problems in this family. Don't use Jessica's disappearance as an excuse to settle old scores. David turned to face her. Up close, he could see the calculation in her eyes. She wasn't just defensive. She was actively working to control the narrative. I'm not settling scores. I'm trying to find my niece. Our daughter. Is she? Because this room looks like a museum exhibit, not a place where a child lives. Sophia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and angry underneath. I keep a clean house. I teach Jessica to be organized and responsible. I'm sorry if that doesn't meet with your approval. Where are her toys? Her games? The mess that kids make when they actually play in their rooms. She's very mature for her age. She's 10. 10-year-olds aren't supposed to be mature. They're supposed to be kids. Maybe if you spent more time around children, you'd understand how they develop. The barb hit its target. David had no children of his own, a fact Sophia had used against him before. But this wasn't about his personal life. This was about Jessica. You're right, David said, walking toward the door. I don't understand children, but I understand fear. And that little girl was afraid of something. As he passed Sophia in the doorway, she grabbed his arm. Be very careful about the accusations you make, she said quietly. This is a small town. People talk. Reputations matter. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who cares about this family's well-being. David pulled his arm free. If you really cared about this family's well-being, Jessica would be home right now. David spent the night at the Pine Lodge Motel on the edge of town, the same place he'd stayed when he'd come back for their father's funeral 5 years ago. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial carpet cleaner, and the heater rattled all night like it was trying to shake itself apart. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jessica's face from Christmas 3 years ago. The way she'd sat quietly in the corner while Sophia opened present after present, expensive things that Miles couldn't afford. The way she'd looked at David when he'd asked if she was happy, and how quickly she'd looked away. He should have known then. Should have seen the signs. Should have fought harder for custody when Miles first brought Sophia into their lives at T5 in the morning. David gave up on sleep and made coffee with the motel's ancient machine. The coffee tasted like dirt, but it was hot and caffeinated, which was all he needed. He thought about the notebook page in his jacket pocket. Mom has a secret, and I'm scared. What kind of secret could terrify a 10-year-old? What had Jessica seen or heard that made her afraid of the woman who was supposed to protect her? At 7 in the morning, David drove to Wyatt Elementary. The school was a low brick building surrounded by playground equipment and basketball courts. Cars were already pulling into the parking lot as teachers arrived for another day. Mrs. Patterson, Jessica's fourth-grade teacher, was setting up her classroom when David knocked on the door. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Mr. Avery? I heard about Jessica. Any news overnight? Nothing yet. Can I ask you some questions about how she's been lately? Mrs. Patterson opened the door wider and gestured for him to come in. The classroom smelled like crayons and disinfectant, with posters about math and reading covering every wall. Jessica's desk sat in the second row, empty but for a pencil case decorated with unicorns and a stack of completed homework assignments. How had Jessica been behaving recently? David asked, looking at her empty chair. Her mood, her interactions with other kids. Mrs. Patterson closed the door and lowered her voice. She'd been much quieter the past few weeks, more withdrawn than usual. Jessica's always been a serious child, very responsible and well-behaved, but lately she seemed anxious. Anxious about what? I'm not sure. She used to raise her hand for every question, always eager to participate. But recently, she'd just sit there, staring out the window or doodling in her notebook margins. Did you notice any changes at home? Different pickup arrangements? New people around? That's the thing. Mrs. Maddox used to pick Jessica up every day in that big BMW of hers. But for the past month, Jessica has been walking home alone. When I asked about it, Jessica said her mother was too busy with work. What kind of work does Sophia do? Some kind of consulting business, I think. She always talks about her important clients and business meetings. Mrs. Patterson paused, but I tried calling her several times over the past few weeks to discuss Jessica's change in behavior. She never returned my calls. What did you want to discuss? Jessica had been eating lunch alone instead of with her friends. During recess, she'd sit by herself reading instead of playing. When I asked if everything was okay at home, she said her mom was stressed about money and that there were people coming to the house she didn't know. David's pulse quickened. What kind of people? She didn't elaborate, but she seemed frightened by them. She asked me once if adults were allowed to make children do things they didn't want to do. What did you tell her? I told her that adults should never make children feel unsafe or uncomfortable, and that she could always talk to me if something was wrong. But she clammed up after that. Did she mention anything about a trip? About going somewhere with her mother? Mrs. Patterson's face darkened. About a week ago, she asked me what would happen if a child disappeared and nobody looked for them. She wanted to know if teachers were required to call the police if a student stopped coming to school. David felt cold dread settling in his stomach. What did you tell her? I said that teachers definitely notice when students are absent and that we always contact parents to make sure children are safe. She seemed relieved by that. Mrs. Patterson looked at Jessica's empty desk. I should have pressed harder. Should have called child services. This isn't your fault, isn't it? I'm trained to recognize signs of distress in children. I knew something was wrong, but I let her mother's reputation in the community convince me that I was overreacting. Sophia's reputation. She serves on the school board, volunteers for every fundraiser, donates money to the library. Everyone thinks she's the perfect mother. Mrs. Patterson's voice turned bitter. But perfect mothers don't ignore calls from their children's teachers. Maddox. Sophia had kept her maiden name for business. David wondered what kind of business required her to ignore calls from her daughter's teacher. After leaving the school, David drove to the park where Jessica usually played after school. The playground equipment was empty except for a few younger children with their mothers. He approached a group of kids about Jessica's age who were sitting at a picnic table sharing snacks. "Excuse me," David said, showing them his driver's license with the same last name as Jessica's. "I'm Jessica Maddox's uncle. I'm trying to find out what happened to her. Do any of you know her?" A girl with pigtails and a purple backpack nodded. "I'm Emma. Jessica sits next to me in class. Is she really missing? She didn't come home yesterday. Did she talk to any of you about running away or going somewhere?" Jessica never talked about running away, another child said, a boy with freckles and a dinosaur shirt. "She likes school and her dad." "What about her mom?" David asked carefully. The children exchanged glances. Emma looked around to make sure no adults were listening, then stepped closer to David. "Jessica said her mom had a secret she was scared of," Emma whispered. "She said her mom was going to take her on a trip and she didn't want to go." "When did she tell you this?" "Last week during lunch. She was really upset about it." "What kind of trip?" "To meet some people. Jessica said they weren't nice people and that her mom owed them money or something." The boy with the dinosaur shirt nodded. "She asked us if we thought kids could call the police if their parents tried to make them do something bad." "What did you tell her?" "We told her to tell a teacher," Emma said. "But she said adults always believe other adults instead of kids." David's blood turned cold. Jessica had been reaching out for help, and no one had understood what she was trying to say. "Did she mention anything else about these people or the trip?" "She said her mom was planning to take her somewhere far away, maybe forever," the boy said. "She was scared she'd never see her dad again." "Thank you for talking to me," David said. "You've been very helpful." As he walked back to his truck, David's phone rang. "Miles, where are you?" his brother asked. "Talking to Jessica's friends. Learning things the police should have learned yesterday." "What kinds of things?" Jessica knew something was going to happen to her. She was trying to tell people, but nobody listened. Silence on the other end. "Miles, we need to talk." "Not at the house. Somewhere private." "Why not at the house?" "Because I don't trust your wife." "David, meet me at Murphy's Diner in 20 minutes. Come alone." Murphy's Diner sat on the edge of downtown Wyatt. A 1950s throwback with red vinyl booths and a neon sign that flickered even during the day. David arrived first and chose a booth in the back corner where they could talk without being overheard. Miles walked in 15 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and worry. "Any word?" David asked as Miles slid into the booth across from him. "Nothing. The search teams have covered every inch of the woods around town. The state police are sending more units this afternoon." Miles rubbed his face with both hands. "It's like she just vanished." "Miles, I need to ask you some hard questions, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay, how much do you actually know about Sophia's business?" Miles frowned. "She's a consultant. Marketing and business development for small companies." "What companies?" "I don't know the specifics. She handles a lot of different clients." "Have you ever met any of these clients?" "A few times." "Why?" "Because Jessica told her teacher that strangers have been coming to your house. People she didn't recognize and didn't like." Miles was quiet for a long moment. "There have been some business meetings at the house recently. Sophia said it was more convenient than renting office space." "What kind of meetings?" "I don't know. I was at work during the day, and Sophia handled everything." "Miles, when was the last time you actually paid attention to Jessica's daily routine? Her school performance, her friends, her behavior?" Miles looked away. "I work a lot of hours. Sophia handles most of the parenting stuff." "Because you trust her or because you're avoiding it?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you married a woman you barely knew because she was beautiful and available, and then you handed over responsibility for raising your daughter to someone who treats her like an inconvenience. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you and Jessica spent time together? Just the two of you?" Miles thought about it. "We went to a baseball game in August." "August. It's October, Miles. You haven't spent quality time with your daughter in 2 months." "I've been working overtime to pay for." Miles stopped abruptly. "To pay for what?" "Sophia's been having some financial difficulties with her business. Cash flow problems. I've been picking up extra shifts to help cover expenses." "What kind of expenses?" "I don't know all the details. Business equipment, office supplies, client entertainment." "She handles the finances." David leaned forward. "Miles, how much money has Sophia borrowed from you in the past year?" "It's not borrowing. We're married. We share finances." "How much?" Miles was quiet for a long time. "About $15,000. $15,000? On what?" "Like I said, business expenses." "And she wanted to renovate Jessica's room, buy her new clothes for school, take her to the doctor for checkups. Jessica's room looks like a museum, not a place where a child lives." "And what doctor visits?" "Is Jessica sick?" "No, she's fine. Just routine stuff." But Miles's tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure about that either. "Miles, I found something in Jessica's room." David pulled out the notebook page. "She wrote this. Mom has a secret and I'm scared." Miles stared at the paper. "Where did you find this?" "Hidden in her notebook." "She was afraid, and she was trying to tell someone, but nobody was listening. Maybe she was just being dramatic. Kids write things like that sometimes. Do they?" "Do 10-year-olds usually write about being scared of their parents' secrets?" Miles didn't answer. "I think Sophia is involved in something illegal," David continued. "I think Jessica found out about it. And I think Sophia decided Jessica was a liability." "You're talking about my wife." "I'm talking about a woman who has been systematically isolating your daughter, spending your money on unknown expenses, and meeting with strangers you've never been introduced to. A woman whose own stepdaughter was afraid of her. Even if that's true, it doesn't mean Sophia hurt Jessica, doesn't it? Where was Sophia when Jessica disappeared? What's her alibi?" Miles looked uncomfortable. "She was at home, waiting for Jessica to come back from school." "According to who?" "According to her." "Miles, did anyone else see Sophia at home between 3:15 and 6 o'clock yesterday?" Miles thought about it. "I don't think so. She said she was doing laundry and making dinner. But you didn't come home until after 6, right? So for almost 3 hours, nobody can verify where Sophia actually was." The weight of that realization settled over Miles like a blanket. For the first time since Jessica's disappearance, he looked like he was considering the possibility that his wife might be involved. David drove back to the police station with a growing sense of urgency. Davidson was at his desk, feet propped up, reading a sports magazine like he was on vacation instead of investigating a missing child case. "Find anything useful playing detective?" Davidson asked without looking up from his magazine. Jessica's teacher says she's been withdrawn and anxious for weeks. Her friends say she was scared about a trip Sophia was planning. She was asking people if children could call the police on their parents. Kids say a lot of things. Doesn't mean any of it's true. You need to investigate Sophia more thoroughly. Check her phone records, her financial transactions, her business associates. Davidson finally looked at him, his expression annoyed. Sophia Maddox is a respected member of this community. She volunteers at the church, serves on the school board, organizes charity events. You think a woman like that would hurt her own child? She's not Jessica's biological mother. Miles adopted Jessica when she was 3 after her real parents died in a car accident. So she's been raising that girl for 7 years. That makes her the mother in my book. Then why won't you investigate her properly? Davidson stood up, his bulk intimidating in the small office. Because I know Sophia Maddox, and I know you, David Avery. You've hated that woman since the day your brother married her. This is just an excuse for you to cause trouble and break up their marriage. A child is missing, and she'll turn up. Runaways always do. They get hungry or cold or scared, and they come home with their tails between their legs. Jessica didn't run away. She was taken. By who? Her own mother, yes. Davidson laughed, a harsh sound that filled the small office. You're even crazier than I thought. What possible reason would Sophia have for kidnapping her own kid? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. No, you're not. You're going to stay out of police business and let the professionals handle this investigation. Professionals? You haven't done anything except dismiss every piece of evidence that doesn't fit your preconceived notions. Evidence? You mean the paranoid fantasies of a 10-year-old and the gossip of her classmates. I mean the fact that Jessica was terrified of something at home, that Sophia has been meeting with strangers, that she's been borrowing large amounts of money from my brother, and that she has no alibi for the time Jessica disappeared. Davidson's face darkened. You better be very careful about the accusations you're making. Sophia has friends in this town. Important friends. Like Judge Reed's. Like people who don't appreciate outsiders coming in and stirring up trouble. Is that a threat? It's a warning. This is a small town, David. We take care of our own. And that includes protecting good people from malicious rumors. David realized he was getting nowhere with Davidson. The sheriff was either genuinely incompetent or actively protecting Sophia. Either way, Jessica wasn't going to get justice through official channels. That afternoon, David visited the house again. Sophia answered the door, wearing a different black dress, this one even more expensive looking than the first. Her makeup was perfect, and she'd had her hair done recently. Any word from the search teams? David asked. Nothing yet. She stepped aside to let him in, but her body language was tense, defensive. Miles is at work. He couldn't stand sitting around the house anymore. The house felt different than it had the day before. Quieter, more controlled. The living room had been cleaned and organized, like Sophia was preparing for company. Fresh flowers sat on the kitchen counter in an expensive vase, and the scent of vanilla candles filled the air. You seem to be holding up well, David observed. I'm trying to stay strong for Jessica. She needs us to be positive when she comes home. When she comes home, not if. Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. A mother knows these things, David. Jessica is coming back. How can you be so sure? Because I'm her mother. I know her better than anyone. David studied her carefully. There was something different about her demeanor today. Yesterday, she'd been performing grief and desperation for the cameras. Today, she seemed almost relaxed, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Sophia, can I ask you something? Of course. If you cared about your family, David said, watching her face carefully, you'd want everyone working together to find Jessica. So why are you trying to discourage me from investigating? Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. If you really cared about your family, you'd stay out of this. She's coming back. How do you know that? Sophia's smile was winter cold. Because I'm her mother. I know these things. The way she said it sent chills down David's spine. It wasn't the statement of a worried parent hoping for the best. It was the confident assertion of someone who knew exactly where Jessica was and when she would return. Sophia, Where is Jessica? I don't know what you mean. I think you do. I think you know exactly where she is, and I think you're the one who put her there. That's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious crime. They stared at each other for a long moment, and David saw something he'd never noticed before in Sophia's eyes. Not just coldness or calculation, but genuine hatred. Not for him specifically, but for the situation he represented. For the complications and inconveniences of family responsibility. Be very careful, David, she said quietly. This is a small town. People talk. Reputations matter. And false accusations can ruin lives. Is that a threat? It's reality. I suggest you remember that. As David left the house, he noticed a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there when he'd arrived. Through the tinted windows, he could see the outline of someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching the house. Someone was keeping track of who came and went. The question was whether they were watching David or protecting Sophia. 7 days later, David was drinking coffee in his motel room and reviewing the notes he'd compiled about Sophia's suspicious behavior when someone knocked on the door. He checked the clock on the nightstand, 12:17 a.m. Through the peephole, he saw a small figure standing on the walkway outside his door. Even in the dim light from the motel security lamps, he recognized the silhouette immediately. Jessica. David yanked the door open and pulled her inside, his heart pounding with relief and terror. She was barefoot, her clothes torn and dirty, covered in scratches and bruises. She was shaking violently, whether from cold or trauma or both. "Uncle David," she whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "Don't call Mom. Just help me." David grabbed a blanket from the bed and wrapped it around her, then knelt down to her level. Up close, he could see the full extent of what she'd been through. Her feet were cut and bleeding from walking through the forest without shoes. Bruises covered her arms in finger-shaped patterns. Her hair was matted with dirt and leaves. But her eyes were alert and focused, not the vacant stare of someone who'd been drugged or severely traumatized. "Jessica, what happened? Where have you been?" "She took me on a trip with a man I didn't know." Jessica's voice was steady but quiet, like she was afraid someone might overhear. "They drove me to a cabin in the woods." "Who was the man?" "I don't know his name. He had a gray beard and smelled like cigarettes and beer. Mom gave him money before we left the house." David's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct told him to drive straight to Sophia's house and confront her, but Jessica needed medical attention and safety first. "What happened at the cabin?" "They locked me in a bedroom. There was a blue couch in the living room and a wood stove that they used for heat. Every night, I could hear a motor sound outside, like a generator running." Jessica looked up at him with eyes that held too much knowledge for a 10-year-old. "Another couple came to see me on the second day. The woman had red hair and wore expensive clothes. The man wore a dark suit and took notes in a little book. What did they want? They asked me questions about school and if I had friends. If anyone would miss me if I went away. If Dad paid attention to me or if he was too busy with work." Jessica started crying, but they were quiet tears, like she'd learned to cry silently. They talked about money and clean transfers. I didn't understand what that meant, but they were talking about me like I was something they were buying. David felt physically sick. Clean transfers. Jessica had overheard the negotiation for her own sale. "How did you get away?" "The man with the beard got drunk every night. On the third night, he drank so much he passed out on the couch. I climbed out the bathroom window and ran through the trees. I walked all night until I found a road, then followed it until I recognized where I was." "You were so brave, Jessica. So incredibly smart and brave." "Uncle David, I heard Mom talking on the phone to someone. She said I wasn't her real daughter and that Miles doesn't even notice me half the time. She said this would solve everyone's problems." David pulled out his phone to call 911, but Jessica grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Please don't call Mom. She'll lie again. She always lies, and everyone believes her because she's pretty and smart and knows how to talk to people. I have to call the police, Jessica. They won't believe me. They'll believe her. She has papers that say I'm crazy and make up stories." Before David could respond, car doors slammed outside. Through the window, he saw Sophia getting out of her white BMW, moving with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what was happening. Behind her, Sheriff Davidson emerged from his patrol car, his hand resting on his radio. "Stay behind me," David told Jessica, moving toward the door. Sophia didn't wait for him to invite her in. She pushed past David the moment he opened the door, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Jessica, huddled on the bed. "Jessica, baby, thank God you're safe." Sophia's voice was filled with perfectly calibrated relief and joy. "We've been so worried about you." Jessica backed away from her stepmother, pressing herself against the headboard. "Don't touch me. Honey, you're clearly traumatized," Sophia said, her tone shifting to gentle concern. "Look at you, sweetheart. You've been living in the woods for a week. You must be so confused and frightened." "Jessica," Davidson said, stepping into the room with his notebook ready. "Where have you been? Your family has been worried sick." "I told Uncle David. Mom took me to a cabin with a bad man who smelled like cigarettes. They locked me in a room, and strangers came to look at me." "Honey," Sophia's voice was patient and understanding, like she was talking to a very young child having a tantrum. "You're confused. You ran away from school and got lost in the woods. You've been having bad dreams and mixing them up with reality." "That's not true." Sophia pulled a manila folder from her designer purse and handed it to Davidson. "These are Jessica's medical records from Dr. Patricia Webb, a child psychiatrist in Portland. Jessica has been seeing her for behavioral issues and psychological problems. Fantasy and elaborate lying are common symptoms of her condition." David grabbed the folder and opened it. The record showed multiple visits to Dr. Webb's office over the past 6 months. The notes described Jessica as prone to elaborate fantasies, difficulty distinguishing reality from imagination, and behavioral problems stemming from attachment disorders. "These are fake," David said. "Dr. Webb is a highly respected professional with over 20 years of experience," Sophia replied smoothly. "Jessica has been struggling with psychological issues since her biological parents died. The trauma of abandonment has caused her to create elaborate fantasy scenarios to cope with stress." Davidson looked at Jessica, who was now crying and clinging to David's arm. "Jessica, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you run away from school?" "No. Mom took me to a cabin. There was a man with a beard and a couple who wanted to buy me." "Buy you?" "Jessica, people don't buy children." "They do. They talked about adoption fees and clean transfers, and how no one would look for me." Davidson looked at the medical records again, clearly troubled by the level of detail in Jessica's story, but swayed by the official documentation in his hands. "Mrs. Maddox, I think it would be best if we take Jessica to the hospital for evaluation. She's clearly been through some kind of trauma." "Of course," Sophia said, her voice filled with maternal concern. "Whatever she needs. I just want my daughter to get the help she deserves." As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Jessica looked back at David with eyes that held a desperate message he understood perfectly. "Don't give up on me. Don't let them win." David watched the patrol car disappear into the night, carrying Jessica back into the hands of the woman who tried to sell her. But this time, he had something he didn't have before, that he had Jessica's testimony, detailed and specific. He had proof that Sophia was capable of unthinkable acts, and he had the absolute certainty that he would not stop until he brought her down. David sat in his truck outside Wyatt General Hospital at 6 in the morning. Jessica had been in psychiatric evaluation for 12 hours. Miles hadn't returned any of his calls. Sophia was inside, playing the concerned mother for the doctors, but David knew what he'd heard. Jessica's story was too detailed, too specific to be a fantasy. A 10-year-old doesn't invent terms like clean transfers or describe trauma with such clarity. Sophia had planned to traffic her own daughter, and she was using the town's corruption to cover it up. David's phone rang. "Miles, where the hell have you been?" David demanded. "At the hospital. Sophia told me Jessica's been having episodes." "Episodes?" "She was kidnapped. The doctors say she's showing signs of severe psychological distress. They want to keep her for observation." "Miles, listen to me." Sophia tried to sell Jessica to strangers. Silence on the other end. "David, I know you hate Sophia, but this isn't about me hating her. This is about your daughter being trafficked by the woman you married." "That's impossible." "Is it?" When's the last time you spent real time with Jessica? When's the last time you noticed if she was happy or scared? Another silence. She's my wife, David. The mother of my child. She's not Jessica's mother. She's her predator. Miles hung up. David drove to Eli Rowan's scrapyard on the outskirts of town. Eli had been his best friend in high school, the one person in Wyatt who'd never bought into the town's politics. The scrapyard looked the same as it had 20 years ago. Mountains of twisted metal and broken cars stretching across 10 acres. Eli emerged from a trailer that served as his office, wiping grease from his hands. David Avery, heard you were back in town. I need your help. Eli was 55 now, gray-bearded and weathered, but his eyes were still sharp. This about your niece? Jessica told me she was held in a cabin. Blue couch, wood stove, generator noise every night. You know, every off-the-grid place around here. That could be 50 different cabins. She said they drove for about an hour from town. The bathroom window faced west because she could see the sunset when she escaped. Eli thought for a moment. There's a hunting cabin about 40 miles north. Privately owned, but the owner only uses it during deer season. If someone wanted to hide a kid, can you find it? I could find anything in these woods. They drove north in Eli's pickup truck, following logging roads that barely qualified as paths. The October air was crisp and filled with the smell of pine needles and rain. Why would Sophia do this? Eli asked. Money. It's always been about money with her. But Jessica's her kid. No, she's not. Jessica is Miles's adopted daughter from his first relationship. Sophia married Miles for his insurance money and his house. But a kid is expensive, especially one who's not really yours. They found the cabin after 2 hours of searching. It sat in a clearing surrounded by Douglas firs, exactly as Jessica had described. Blue couch visible through the front window. A metal chimney pipe running up from where a wood stove would be. The door was unlocked. Inside, the cabin was sparse, but lived in. Someone had been here recently. David checked the trash can and found child-sized zip ties, cut and discarded. His stomach turned. Look at this, Eli called from the kitchen. He held up receipts from a gas station about 5 miles south. Food, fuel, and camping supplies. All purchased 3 days before Jessica disappeared. David found more evidence in the bedroom. A hidden SIM card under the mattress and a small recording device wedged behind the headboard. Why would they record themselves? Eli asked. Insurance. If someone tried to back out of the deal or report them, they'd have evidence to blackmail them. David powered on the recording device. Most of the files were corrupted, but one was partially intact. Sophia's voice, scratchy but recognizable. She's not my real daughter. Miles doesn't even notice half the time. This solves everyone's problems. David saved the file to his phone. They searched the rest of the cabin and found a rental agreement in a kitchen drawer. The cabin was leased to Sarah Johnson and paid for through a PayPal account linked to an email address David recognized. Sophia designs@gmail.com, that Sophia's business email. David knew the local police wouldn't touch Sophia based on his evidence alone, but he could build a case strong enough to force their hand. He needed allies who understood the system and how to work around its corruption. June Abernathy lived in a small house near the elementary school, a modest place filled with books and photographs from her 30 years as a social worker. She'd been retired for 5 years, but her reputation for protecting children was legendary in the county. If anyone would help him expose Sophia, it would be June. I've been waiting for someone to knock on my door about that woman, June said when David explained the situation. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. You know something about Sophia? I know she's been taking foster children for the past 2 years. Short-term emergency placements that never get reported properly to the state. Kids who disappear from the system without proper documentation. Why didn't you report it? I tried, but she has Judge Reed's wrapped around her finger, and any complaint about her get buried in bureaucratic hell. The local child services office treats her like she walks on water because she's willing to take difficult placements on short notice. How many children? At least 6 that I know of. All between the ages of 8 and 12. All placed with her for supposedly temporary care, while permanent homes were found. What happened to them? According to the official records, they were transferred to families in other states. private adoptions arranged through Sophia's connections. But I could never verify any of those placements. David felt cold understanding wash over him. Sophia hadn't started with Jessica. She'd been running a trafficking operation using the foster care system as her hunting ground. Will you help me stop her? What do you need? June filed an anonymous complaint with the state's Child Protective Services, bypassing the local authorities completely. She also provided David with documentation of the missing foster children and copies of Sophia's suspicious placement records. Meanwhile, Eli worked on recovering data from the SIM card they'd found at the cabin. The card contained GPS logs that matched Jessica's timeline perfectly, showing repeated trips between Wyatt and the cabin during the week she'd been missing. It also contained call logs to 3 different phone numbers. David traced one of the numbers to a couple in Portland who'd been arrested 2 years earlier for running a fake adoption scam. They'd been released on bail and disappeared before their trial. June, David said when he called her with the information. Do you remember a couple from Portland involved in foster child fraud? Rebecca and Thomas Crane. Red-haired woman. Man who wears expensive suits. Oh my God. Yes, I remember them. They ran a network that placed children with families who paid cash for private adoptions. No background checks, no legal paperwork, no questions asked. They're the ones Jessica saw at the cabin. David, if Sophia is working with the Cranes, this is bigger than just Jessica. They could have trafficked dozens of children. David drove to Portland and met with Kyle Martinez, a tech specialist who owed him a favor from his days working corporate security. Kyle operated out of a cluttered apartment filled with computer equipment and empty energy drink cans. This audio file is pretty damaged, Kyle said, examining the recording device they'd found at the cabin. But I might be able to restore some of it. Give me a few hours. Kyle worked through the afternoon, running the audio through various filters and enhancement programs. When he finished, Sophia's voice was crystal clear. The girl is 10, healthy, no behavioral problems except for asking too many questions. The adoption fee is $25,000, half up front. She's not my biological child, so there won't be any family looking for her long term. The father is distracted by work and financial problems, so he won't notice if she goes missing for a while. Jesus Christ, Kyle whispered. She's literally selling a kid like she's negotiating a car deal. Can you clean up the rest of the recording? There's more, but it'll take time. Some of these files are severely corrupted. Kyle continued working and managed to restore another segment. We've done this 6 times before with foster kids, and it's worked perfectly. The paperwork shows they were transferred to families in other states, and no one follows up. This time is different because she's not officially in the system, but that actually makes it easier. No state oversight, no caseworker visits. David felt sick listening to Sophia discuss trafficking children like it was a routine business transaction. But he also felt vindicated. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was a calculated, ongoing operation. There's one more clear section, Kyle said. This one is more recent, probably from when they had Jessica at the cabin. The third recording was Sophia talking to someone on the phone. The buyer wants to finalize the transaction tomorrow. He's willing to pay the full amount in cash, but he wants to inspect the merchandise first. Keep her clean and make sure she doesn't have any visible injuries. We can't afford to lose this sale. David saved all the recordings to his phone and several backup devices. This was evidence of an ongoing trafficking operation, not just an isolated incident with Jessica, but he also knew something else from listening to the recordings. Sophia was still planning to complete the sale. Jessica wasn't safe in the hospital. She was just being held until Sophia could arrange another opportunity. David needed to move fast. David left the recording device with Kyle and drove back to Wyatt. He had enough evidence to prove Sophia's guilt, but not enough to ensure the local authorities would act on it. He needed Sophia to confess. David spent the next day preparing his trap. He created a fake document on hospital letterhead stating that Jessica was being relocated permanently to a secure psychiatric facility in California for intensive treatment. The document made it appear that Jessica would be removed from Wyatt indefinitely. That evening, David broke into Sophia's house while she was visiting Jessica at the hospital. He left the fake document on her kitchen table where she'd find it immediately upon returning home. Then he waited. David parked across the street from the house with a clear view of the kitchen window. At 9:30 p.m., Sophia's BMW pulled into the driveway. David watched her enter the house and turn on the lights. 0.5 minutes later, she was on the phone. David had planted a listening device in the kitchen that morning, a small transmitter Kyle had given him. Sophia's conversation came through clearly on David's receiver. "We have a problem," Sophia said. "They're moving her to California." "What do you mean moving her?" The voice on the other end was male, older. "Psychiatric facility. Permanent placement. The sale is off." "Sophia, we had a deal. I've already paid half." "I know, but if she's in California, there's no way to get to her. Then we need to move fast. Tonight." "Are you insane? She's in a hospital with security." Then figured out, "I'm not losing $25,000 because you couldn't control a 10-year-old. Look, Thomas, maybe we can find another kid. Someone easier to handle. I don't want another kid. I want the one we agreed on. The one we've been planning for." David's blood ran cold. Thomas Crane, the man from Portland. They were still planning to take Jessica. "She'll be transported tomorrow morning," Sophia continued. "There might be a window when they're moving her to the ambulance." "Where?" "Hospital parking garage. 7 a.m. I'll be there." "No. If something goes wrong, I can't be connected to this. Just handle it yourself." "Sophia, if you're backing out of this deal." "I'm not backing out. I'm being smart. After tomorrow, Jessica will be gone and no one will ask questions. We just have to wait for the right opportunity. And if there isn't one, then we make one." The conversation ended. David had what he needed. Sophia admitting to planning Jessica's kidnapping and sale, coordinating with known criminals, and plotting to take her from the hospital. But he also knew something else. They were planning to grab Jessica in the morning. David called the state police hotline and reported a kidnapping plot in progress. He provided them with the audio recording, the evidence from the cabin, and the meeting details for the hospital parking garage. Then he called the hospital and spoke to the head of security. "This is David Avery. You have my niece Jessica Maddox in psychiatric hold. Her life is in danger." At 6:45 a.m., David sat in Sheriff Davidson's office with a flash drive containing everything. The restored audio files, GPS data from the SIM card, photos from the cabin, rental agreements, and transaction logs connecting Sophia to the trafficking ring. Davidson hadn't wanted to see him, but the state police investigators standing behind David made the meeting inevitable. "This is substantial evidence," Detective Maria Santos said, reviewing the files. "We'll need to verify the audio recordings, but if they're authentic, David said. "I'll watch her make the calls." "You illegally wiretapped her house," Davidson protested. "I recorded conversations in which she planned to kidnap a child from a hospital," David replied. "I think a judge will overlook the technical violation." Detective Santos opened the file containing the GPS data. These location pings placed the suspects at the cabin during the exact time frame of Jessica's disappearance. In this audio recording, she played Sophia's voice. The girl is 10, healthy, no behavioral problems. The adoption fee is $25,000. That's a clear confession to child trafficking, Santos said. Davidson shifted uncomfortably. Sophia Maddox is a respected member of this community. These recordings could be fabricated. Then we'll let a jury decide, Santos replied. We're placing her under arrest immediately. At 7:15 a.m., Sophia Maddox was arrested in the hospital parking garage as she watched Thomas Crane wait for Jessica's transport. Crane was arrested simultaneously when undercover officers posed as hospital staff. Sophia's face went white when Detective Santos read her the charges: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, child trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy to commit interstate commerce of minors. This is ridiculous, Sophia said. Jessica is my daughter. I was trying to get her help by selling her to strangers for $25,000. Santos asked, I never. We have recordings of you negotiating the sale, Mrs. Maddox. We have financial records showing payments. We have your rental agreement for the cabin where she was held. Sophia looked around desperately. I want a lawyer. Of course. But first, we'd like to ask about the other children. What other children? The foster children you've placed over the past 2 years. The ones who disappeared from official records. For the first time, Sophia's composure cracked completely. The trial began 6 months later. David sat in the front row every day, watching Sophia's defense team try to explain away the overwhelming evidence. Jessica testified via video link, her voice steady and clear as she described her week in the cabin. She identified photos of the location and picked Thomas and Rebecca Crane out of a lineup. "Did Mrs. Maddox ever tell you why she was taking you to the cabin?" the prosecutor asked. "She said we were going to meet some nice people who might want to be my new family," Jessica replied. "She said Dad was getting sick of taking care of me." "How did that make you feel?" "Scared. I didn't want a new family. I wanted to stay with Dad and Uncle David." Eli testified about finding the cabin and the evidence inside. June Abernathy testified about the missing foster children and Sophia's suspicious placement history. Kyle Martinez testified about the audio recordings and their authenticity. "The voice patterns and digital signatures confirm these recordings are genuine," he told the jury. "They have not been altered or manipulated in any way." The prosecutor played the clearest recording for the jury. "She's not my real daughter. Miles doesn't even notice half the time. The adoption fee is $25,000, half up front." Several jury members visibly recoiled. Sophia's defense attorney tried to paint her as a desperate mother seeking help for a troubled child. Mrs. Maddox was overwhelmed by Jessica's behavioral issues, the attorney argued. She was seeking alternative placement options, not selling her. Alternative placement? The prosecutor responded during cross-examination. To criminals who paid cash and asked no questions about the child's welfare? During Sophia's testimony, she tried to shift blame to Miles. "He never bonded with Jessica," she said. "He worked all the time and left her care to me. I was doing what I thought was best." "Best for who?" the prosecutor asked. "You or Jessica?" "For everyone, including the bank account where you deposited $12,500 a day before Jessica disappeared." Sophia's face flushed red. "That money was for household expenses." "Household expenses from Thomas Crane? A man with no legitimate source of income who paid you cash for a child. I didn't know his background, but you knew enough to rent a remote cabin under a false name and hold Jessica there against her will." "She wasn't being held against her will." "Then why were child-sized zip ties found in the trash at the cabin you rented?" Sophia had no answer. When asked if she wanted to apologize or show remorse, Sophia stared directly at the jury. "I provided for that child for 7 years. I gave her a home, food, clothes, education. I don't owe anyone an apology for trying to find her a better situation." "A better situation than being sold to strangers?" the prosecutor pressed. "A situation where she wouldn't be a burden anymore." The courtroom erupted. Judge Williams had a call for order. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all charges. Judge Williams sentenced Sophia to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As the bailiff led her away in shackles, Sophia looked back at David one last time. Her expression held no remorse, no regret, only cold hatred. Miles signed over custody of Jessica to David 3 weeks after the trial ended. He'd entered a rehabilitation program and admitted he wasn't capable of being the father Jessica needed. "I failed her," he told David during their last conversation. "I was so focused on making Sophia happy that I never noticed my own daughter was suffering." "She's going to be okay," David assured him. "Take care of her. Be the parent I never was." David legally adopted Jessica 6 months later. They moved to a small house outside Portland, far from Wyatt and its secrets. 1 year after the trial, David and Jessica drove back to the cabin in the woods. Jessica had asked to see it one more time. They stood in the clearing where she'd been held prisoner. The cabin was empty now, officially sealed as evidence. Weeds grew up around the foundation. Jessica pulled a silver necklace from her pocket, something Sophia had given her for her 9th birthday. "I kept this because I thought it meant she loved me," Jessica said. "But she just wanted me to look pretty for the people who were going to buy me." She dropped the necklace on the ground and stepped on it. "She can't hurt anyone else now," Jessica whispered. David put his hand on her shoulder. "No, and she never will." They walked back to the truck together. Jessica had grown 3 inches in the past year and gained weight. The hollow look in her eyes was gone, replaced by something David had never seen there before: security. Uncle David, yeah, thank you for believing me. You never have to thank me for that. Ever. As they drove away from the cabin, David glanced in the rearview mirror. Jessica was looking out the back window, watching the place where her nightmare had happened disappear into the trees. When she turned around, she was smiling. "Can we get ice cream on the way home?" she asked. "We can get whatever you want." And for the first time in Jessica's life, David meant it. She was safe now. She was loved, and she would never be anyone's burden again. The girl who had survived a week in hell had grown into someone stronger than her trafficker, smarter than her corrupt protectors, and braver than the adults who had failed her. Sophia had tried to sell Jessica's future. Instead, she had guaranteed her own destruction.